So a lot of stories, we start with this, as Shedeur Sanders was sliding, suddenly stories started to pop out from Jacina Anderson, Todd McShay, Jonathan Jones, NFL insider for CBS, stuff that wasn't out there as much pre-draft. I mean, we knew that legendary draft room. We could see that was a bit cringe. But when people were starting to explain, well, what happened? Well, stories started coming out that he sandbagged certain interviews or was brash. Bruce Feldman wrote an article that I read. He not only didn't compete at the Senior Bowl or NFL Scouting Combine, a former NFL quarterback coach Feldman spoke with Sunday morning said, not surprising. The intel I was getting on Sanders was shocking. He had no self-awareness. So why did he drop? Am I surprised? Shocked, actually. I would have taken him if I was the Steelers. But between his dad, Deion, who has many friends in the media, saying during the Super Bowl on multiple interviews, we will dictate terms. We will not play for certain teams. And then between Sanders, Shedeur sandbagging interviews, that probably explains it. So I'll tell you, after this show Friday before round 2, I talked to 2 different times an executive in the league asking questions. What do you think he'll go? And this executive said to me, he said, if he doesn't go in the first 6 to 8 picks at the top of the second round, then people view him as a backup. And I'll quote it here, I'm not sure how many teams want that circus in the building as a backup. Remember Tim Tebow, celebrity backup, a mess in New York. Bill Belichick made a decision once Mac Jones beat him out in New England. Remember, they let Cam go. Nobody wants a celebrity backup quarterback, especially when Deion, the dad, waited until mid to late March to say, okay, now anybody can draft my son. So now, was I surprised? Yes. Pittsburgh didn't have a quarterback in a division with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. I mean, I don't know who their quarterback is. But Daniel Jeremiah, a former 3-time scout on the NFL Network, made a very interesting point. Jeremiah is really good at what he does. He was quoted as saying that the one quarterback that he thought was similar to Shedeur Sanders was Kenny Pickett. And what Daniel Jeremiah said, well, they did Kenny Pickett, and they got burned, and they may have looked at it and said, yeah, we've done that kind of quarterback before. Not a big arm, moves okay, decent numbers. Yeah, we're going to pass on that. And Pittsburgh did. Remember, Shedeur Sanders also said this, words matter, people listen. He said this at the NFL Combine, Shedeur said, quote, if you ain't trying to change the franchise, the culture, don't get me. Teams listened. They didn't get him. So the league sent out a very clear message. Cam Ward was indisputably the best prospect and maybe close to an A prospect, but everybody else was a B and a C prospect. And in life, if you're not an A, then you have to get the intangibles right. Right? Your intangibles for Dak Prescott. Dak's never thrown an A ball, but he was an A++ with intangibles. That Brock Purdy, small, not a great athlete, A++ with intangibles. People are telling you they didn't like some of Shedeur's intangibles. Remember, March and April, NFL doesn't owe you anything. March and April are job interview months. And in February and early March, Dad Deion was saying, we'll set terms. There are teams he won't play for. So I don't think this is all on Shedeur, but, you know, somebody made a point this morning in our staff meeting. It's almost like you're a young actor and you'd only ever been in your dad's movies, and then you interviewed with some other directors to finally not be in one of your dad's movies, and you kind of lack self-awareness and turn some people off. So when I hear he sandbagged interviews or was not a professional from people I trust, that goes a long way in explaining it. And I believe, I said this years ago about backup quarterbacks. I've said this more than once. A perfect backup quarterback is a guy that could go to the local mall, put sunglasses and a baseball hat on, walk through the mall, and nobody would bother him. Nobody would recognize him. Your starting quarterback in the NFL is going to be a star. All right? All starting quarterbacks in their towns are stars. A backup, nobody wants a celebrity. And so that's the downside. I don't blame only Shedeur, but when you hear he sandbag interviews, That's what Dad did. Deion sandbag interviews. Legendarily sandbagged interviews. Bragged about sandbagging interviews. But Deion was an A+++ prospect, the best corner of all time. Everybody knew going into this draft that Shedeur wasn't a great arm guy. I would have drafted him. Not a mobile guy. I would have drafted him. I was shocked by it. And I was told, if he doesn't go in the first 6 to 8 picks in the top of the second round, people are telling you they see him as a backup. Peter Schrager used to work here, now works at ESPN, also brought up an interesting point. Deion has worked for so many media outlets and has so many friends in the NFL. Nobody wanted to give him the truth. Your son's okay. And then once the noise scares a lot of teams, especially at one position. The discussions are always different about quarterbacks than non-quarterbacks. When I talk to NFL people, we always talk about toughness. We talk about productivity and speed and vertical. When you talk about quarterbacks, it's leadership. Will guys follow him over a hill? Is he a foxhole guy? The conversation changes. So, and I got a lot of different thoughts on this where I actually defend Shedeur on something that I thought he did a really good job on. But Cleveland drafted him. There are those that believe that the GM and the coach didn't want to draft him. They'd already drafted a quarterback, and Jimmy Haslam, the owner, stepped in like he did with Deshaun Watson. Regardless, here's Andrew Berry on the pick.
Once it got to a point where it felt like it was at a pretty steep discount, we just felt like, hey, especially relative to the alternative ways that we could use the selection, this made the most sense.
All right, more on that in a bit. Their reaction was stoic, to be honest. Not the most excited-looking draft room, to be honest.